everybody, welcome to Experiments in Crafting. Happy New Year's Eve. Tonight I am going to be showing you how to make a crochet edge blanket. Crochet edge blankets are one of my favorite easy to make gifts as long as you have the right tools. So I'm going to talk to you about how to make a blanket, what tools I recommend that you have, and just some tips on picking out yarns to work with the blankets and stuff like that. So, to get started, I've got a couple of examples of finished crochet edge blankets. This one here has a few rows. It's got a single crochet edge and then a double crochet border around it. Looks like I did 3 double crochets in each single crochet. Well, it looks like I did 3 and then 1, 3 and then 1. So I've got a nice solid edge with not too much ruffle, but a little bit of wave to it. On this blanket, I took a piece of fleece and I did a single crochet border, and it pretty much just looks like a blanket that you would buy at Walmart with a serged edge. So it just puts a very, very simple border on it. This would be a perfect border for a kid's blanket. Say you have a 5-year-old, grandson, granddaughter who is really into a particular character. You go to Joann Fabric, you can buy a piece of fabric with that favorite character. You can put a single crochet border on it, and it's perfect for the year that they like that character, and then nobody's upset when they get rid of it in a year. So kind of a really simple, easy to make project. Makes everybody happy, and you don't spend a lot of time and effort on it, versus something like a corner-to-corner blanket where you could make a whole picture of their favorite character, but you're going to spend 30 or 40 hours working on this blanket only to have them grow out of it in a couple years anyway. So this is just sort of an alternative, nice, easy, usually kind of cheap project. So there's my couple of examples. I have a couple things I want to talk about with crochet edge blankets. I'm going to set these guys aside. If you have any questions about these blankets, just go ahead and ask in the chat, and I can pull them back out. So one of the things I'd like to talk about is the tools. I use a Fiskars rotary cutter. It really doesn't matter what kind of rotary cutter you use. They all are pretty interchangeable. Mine is set up to be used in my left hand because I am left-handed, but generally they come with the blade on the other side. You just take this little nut off the end here, and you have a blade guard, and then this is what my blade looks like. And you'll notice it sort of looks like a gear. The parts that cut the holes are right here. And then as you rotate, this part doesn't cut anything, and so it skips each little chunk of your fabric. So I generally call this a skip cutter if you're searching for it. This one is made by Kay's Crochet. I've found it online on Amazon. It's about $12 or $14, which is a little bit more than a lot of the other ones. However, I've made dozens of crochet edge blankets at this point, and I really haven't had to replace it. I don't have any trouble getting the holes to cut through multiple layers of fabric. It's been a really nice tool for me. So I think it's worth the $12 or $14 investment. I did recently pick up a Fiskars brand skip cutter, and this skip cutter I think was only like $1.97. It was an add-on on Amazon, so I just threw it in my cart, picked it up. I have not actually had to open this one because, like I said, this one's still as sharp as the day I got it, it seems. So I'm going to open this one up tonight, and we're going to see how it does. I have a friend in my knitting group that I go to on Wednesday nights that tried to buy a skip cutter. She bought the one that Joann Fabric sells in store, and it really was not good. It wasn't sharp enough to make it through 2 layers of flannel. So it really wasn't working for her. So then she bought a Fiskars set of, I think she got 5 blades in one package, and every single one of them had little divots in the blade. So when she was cutting, the little slices were not cut all the way through. They'd have spots where there were still threads attached, and so she couldn't get her crochet hook in. And so finally she bought the one that I bought from Amazon, and it has worked perfectly for her ever since. So I don't see any divots in this blade, this Fiskars blade, but I'm going to go ahead and open it up, and we're going to try it out. The first thing I notice is that it's completely covered in oil, and so I'm going to have to get something to wipe that off because it's going to get all over the fabric. So I'll get something to wipe that off, and we'll give this a try tonight on the live stream. So I'm going to set this aside for right now. One of the things that you might ask is, well, if I don't have a rotary cutter, what can I do? So I did pick this up at, I think I got this on clearance at Hobby Lobby when they had a bunch of crochet books on clearance. This book came with 2 crochet hooks. One of the crochet hooks is a normal 1.75 millimeter hook, just a normal rounded edge. It's got looks like an inline throat, so Susan Bates style throat on it. The other hook is also 1.75, but you'll notice that it has a sharp pointy end on it. I don't know if you can see that. I'm going to have it zoomed in a little bit. There we go. Way out of focus. Sorry.
Pull it back towards you. Oh,
Too far? Okay. That's better. Okay. So you can see this one has a pointy edge on it, and this one is rounded over. So this hook is designed for stabbing right through the fabric, and then you do your entire first row of crochet, and then you switch over to this hook for any additional rows. The problem with this is these are 1.75 millimeter hooks, which means that you have to use crochet thread. 1.75 is even too small for fingering weight yarn. I usually use like a 3.5 millimeter hook. So this is another option if you don't want to get a skip cutter and cut your holes into your fabric. You can get sharp hooks. There might be other sharp hooks that you can use to make bigger holes and use larger yarn, but I don't think you can stab through and pull like worsted weight yarn through fabric without making a real big mess of it. One of the things that I did really like this book for, and I'm going to show you real quick, are some of the suggestions and the edging pattern. So it's got some suggestions of running ribbon through the edging and making these cute little decorative edges. It's got some project suggestions. And one of the things that I didn't even think to do, but I'm going to see if I can find a picture of them. They have these really cute little burp cloths with just crochet edge. It's just 2 pieces of flannel. They're cut in sort of a bean shape. I'm not really sure how to describe the shape there. They put a little crochet edge, and they're super cute and would be a really cute personal handmade gift, but also doesn't require a lot of time or energy in making this project. So you've got a couple of different options here. You don't have to just make blankets. I think they also show, you know, you can edge the bottom of like a apron or a skirt just for a personalized touch. But basically there's a lot you can do. They show a collar for a dress here. And again, another apron with a crochet edged bottom. But one of the other things that I thought was in here was a bib. and I don't see that. There's the collar for a dress with a crochet edge. Oh wait, it's on the back. On the back cover they show a bib here. Sorry, it's hard to do this with, there, bib there, with a little crochet edge. Burp cloths, blanket, all that. So there's just a few options here, and this one's called Edging for Kids. But like I said, one of the things that I really liked about this book was that it showed a couple of different edges and some ideas. So might be a book that if you're interested in doing some more crochet edging that you pick up. A lot of the stitch dictionaries actually have edging suggestions. So if you check out my reviews on stitch dictionaries, there's a handful of them where I'll mention that they have edge patterns. So check those out if you're interested in finding out which books have those edgings. One of the other books, and I guess I don't even know if I would call this a book, it's more of a pamphlet. It's by Leisure Arts. It's Strawberry Shortcake. I think it's from 2004, so it might be difficult to get this in print. But it also shows some cute little edges with some Strawberry Shortcake fabric. But you can see there's a lot you can do with the edges after a few rounds. So you can make kind of a lacy edge, a more solid, there we go, a more solid edge with a little scallop to it, kind of a lattice look to the edge. So just different options. This one just sort of gives you a tutorial on how to make a blanket. And this one's called Strawberry Shortcake Crochet Edges by Leisure Arts. You can probably get this on eBay if I had to guess, used, because you're probably not going to be able to find it in print at like Joann Fabric. All right. So back to, materials. So we talked about tools. I recommend this K's Crochet blade on any rotary cutter. There are ones available at Joann Fabric, but as I said, the single experience that I've seen, it didn't work out. So I recommend that one. So when you're at Joann Fabric or whatever fabric store you go to, one of the things that you're going to want to pick out is the fabric that you're going to make your blanket with. So this fabric here is just a single sheet of fleece. I bought it as a remnant, but I wanted to talk about this fabric has an issue with it that you'll have to keep in mind if you buy remnants. This pattern on here is set so that it only goes side to side. So it only goes this direction. If you turn the blanket this way, your whole pattern is sideways. So hopefully that makes sense. Basically, I bought a yard of this thinking that I could make like a cute little kid's blanket, but if you lay this out on a kid, it's all sideways. So that doesn't really work out. What I'm probably going to do with this fabric, and I'm probably going to use this one for the example tonight, what I'm going to do with this fabric is cut it in half and make 2 car seat blankets. So car seat blankets are basically little blankets that you just can tuck around a small kid in a car seat. They are not big blankets that you'd want to use as like bedding or anything like that. They're just little, they tuck around, they don't drag. They're really nice for strollers because they're not dragging on the ground. So they're just little blankets. And so this fabric, because I can't use it long ways, I'm going to cut in half and make small blankets out of. So I'm going to set this one aside. I've got a bunch of different things to show you here. All right. So this is the type of fabric or the type of print that you'd want if you were picking remnants, because this can be turned any direction. So this fabric can be turned any direction because the cats are all going different ways. So this is a nice piece to buy as a remnant because you can use it with a fabric direction. So you get the 54 inches or so So if you only get it 36 wide, you still get a blanket large enough for a kid's blanket. This I have doubled up, and I was just going to make either like a burp cloth or a doll blanket, depending on what I want to use it for. But I have this pinned so that the layers stay together, which might be the noise that you're hearing if you're hearing the clicking. I've got a couple different types of fabric here. So this is this really popular baby fabric with the little bumps. I think that this fabric will work just fine. I haven't cut it, and I'm going to try doing that tonight if we've got time on the stream. Because one of the problems with certain fabrics is that they shred when you cut the little holes in the edge. And I'll show you one of those fabrics. This here is a piece of Star Wars fabric that I bought to make like a little car seat blanket out of. And I cut all the holes in it, but when you cut the holes, it shreds this direction. And you can see if you just start to pull on it, it just comes apart. So when I was putting, and it's not that I just put my holes too close, because I redid the holes and they just still shred. I'm trying to find a particularly bad spot, but the whole fabric just comes apart at this edge. So when you cut your holes in, it just falls apart. So this doesn't work at all. This is sort of a long fleece. I'm not really sure how to describe this. It might be like minky feel or something. It's very, very soft. And it's got longer pile, I guess is the word that I'm looking for, versus fleece, which is basically flat. One of the things that crochet edge blankets are really good for is if you take little kids shopping with you, they often choose pretty atrocious yarns. So super bright colors, things like this in neon and black, and you know, they want a scarf or a hat made out of this, but they have a burgundy coat or something, and you can't really make a scarf to go with that. Yarns like this are great for adding to a crochet edge. So you can just grab some fabric in a solid color and put a really vibrant edge on it, and it works just fine. One of the other things that you can do is you can use bulky yarn. However, I recommend putting a single crochet row in worsted weight, just because it will be a lot easier to pull worsted weight yarn through the holes. So in this blanket, which I made a long time ago, this blanket's probably 4 or 5 years old. It belongs to a 7-year-old who I think was about 3 when I made it, of a kid of one of my friends. And on this blanket, I put a just worsted weight white yarn edge, and then I put some of this cotton yarn around the edge. And this has been washed and dried 150 times probably at this point. And really, the reason I have it is because it has an edge that's starting to unravel. It finally broke after being washed and dried so many times, but it's really had a pretty good run. It still actually looks pretty good, and the edging is holding up pretty well, but like I said, in one spot, which I can't actually even find right now, it is unraveling, and so I've got it to fix it. So this is a really good example of one of those character fabrics that you can grab and throw a cute edge on. She's really outgrown My Little Pony. She's not super into it anymore, but she loves this blanket anyway. But it would be really nice to just pick up a piece of character fabric and throw an edge on it and be done with a present. Actually, here's the spot where it's coming undone. So I need to repair this section here. So this is the section where it's coming undone. It looks like it just snapped because I've got all of the yarn here. So I should be able to repair this pretty easily, and maybe I'll make a video showing you how I go about repairing my any crochet damage that I've had in the past. All right, so I'm going to set this one aside. One of the other things that crochet edge blankets are great for is using up yarn that's not good for other things. This is pretty stiff cotton yarn. It's Cascade Sunseeker. It has a ribbon of like glitter through it, and it's not very soft. It's got kind of a little bit of scratchiness where the glitter is, but it is perfect for crochet edges because it holds up really well. Cotton washes and wears really well, and because it's just the very edge of the blanket, it doesn't really matter that it's got just a tiny bit of scratchiness where the glitter is. This isn't a yarn that I would want up next to my face. I wouldn't really want to be feeling it against my face necessarily. It wouldn't make good like gloves or anything like that. So this is perfect, and this is actually what I used on this blanket, is some Sunseeker, and it did soften with wash, but it's held up really well. So you could just, pick a fabric that you like at the store, and then, this coordinates nicely with it, and you can get started on a project. So those are just some ideas for some crochet edge blankets. And if anybody has any questions, now would be a good time to answer because I'm going to switch over into tutorials. So you can ask anything in the chat throughout, and I'm trying to keep an eye on it over here, but also my husband's watching and will let me know. All right. All right, so I'm going to switch over and I'm going to show you how to make a crochet edge blanket from, start to finish. I'm not going to finish the whole thing, but I'll show you my steps and how I go about doing this. All right. Well, let's get a few things out. I'm going to grab my mat off the wall here. All right, so I have a cutting mat that I use with my cutting tools. And what do I want to do here? All right, well, we were going to try out... All right, let's start with trying out the Fiskars cutter, just to see how that goes. Because I do know that Fiskars cutter is available at, like, Walmart and stuff. So it might be a little bit more convenient for you than ordering from Amazon and waiting for it. I don't think when I bought it that it was available on Amazon Prime. Oh, and we have a comment. Hello from Illinois. So one viewer in Texas, I'm in Illinois, so we're on the same time zone. So Happy New Year's Eve to you. And thanks for spending it with me tonight. I need something to wipe the oil off this. Yeah. All right. So this came extremely oiled, and I don't know that you can see that, but there's actually liquid on it. So I'm going to wipe this off and kind of rub it in because I assume it's there for some reason. But I don't want all that oil on here. So to put this back together, I usually set it on the blade guard and then put my rotary cutter back on top of it. And then you screw this thing back on. And again, mine's set up to be used left-handed. If you're right-handed, you would put yours on this side so that it's up when it's in your right hand. So, first thing I have here is just some scrap flannel. And I'm going to just make an edge right here, and then I'm going to grab a crochet hook and see if the holes went all the way through. All right, so I'm going to grab my guide here. A while back I took a couple of classes at Joann Fabric on sewing and whatnot, and one of the things that came out of it was buying one of these plexiglass guides. They're really nice if you're going to be doing edging on things, because they just give you somewhere to align your rotary cutter. So normally what I would do is I would cut these edges off. These are called selvages. So you can just cut those off and then put your edge wherever you want it to be along your fabric. But for right now, and like I said, this is just a scrap piece, I'm just going to test this. Testing along the selvages is not the best because these are tighter woven, so I'm going to go in just a little bit. And I usually start off my fabric, and I put a good amount of pressure and go nice and slow and go off the other edge. And you can't see this, but it does look like it made the holes. I'm going to grab a crochet hook. Which apparently I don't have. There they are. I set them right in reach. So I usually like an F or a G hook for the first row, just because it goes through the holes really nicely. And so you should be able to see here. There. So it got through the 2 layers without a problem. And again, you can see it's getting through here. So this Fisker's blade seems to have worked okay, and then on this one it did not get through all the way. So I'm going to check and just see if my fabric moved. It did it okay there. And again, I'm having a little bit of trouble getting through that second layer. So if I pull these apart, I think that these holes are okay. But they're not perfect. There they are. These holes are actually a little bit littler than my normal edge too, and I'll show you what those look like in just a second. So we've done 2 layers of flannel. I'm going to try 2 layers of fleece here and just see if it can do it at all. I don't really care for double layer fleece blankets. I think they're just way too heavy. But they're very popular for like sporting events and stuff like that. People like to take them outside. And I think a crochet edge looks just so much nicer than tied blankets do. So I think this is a good option. They would be great as giveaways for fundraisers. All right, let's see what we did here. So it got through the 2 layers of fleece without a problem. I think that it actually has an easier time with fleece than it does with flannel. I think flannel is tighter woven, and so I think it's harder to cut through. But yeah, it seems to have gotten through 2 layers of fleece without a problem. Again, I think these holes are a little bit smaller than my crochet, or my K's Crochet skip cutter cuts. And actually, that makes sense too, because if you look at the 2 blades, the size of, if you look at the 2 blades here, the size of the cutting portion is smaller on the Fiskars than it is on the K's Crochet one. This has a bigger cutting surface. This Fiskars one looks like it has more prongs. Yeah, so it has more prongs but the cutting surface is probably almost half the size. Maybe a little less than half, maybe 40%. So I'm going to switch over to this K's Crochet one and put it back together. All right, and so somebody was commenting that they got a good deal on the Fiskars with the cutting mat at Michael's with a coupon in Canada. So that does sound like a good deal. And if the Fiskars is working out for you, that's great. Like I said, the friend of mine, all of her blades had little nicks in here. And so when you were cutting, if there was like a little chip in here, it wasn't cutting through the fabric, and it was leaving some of the threads intact. And so when you stuck a crochet hook in there, it just ran into those threads every time. All right, so I'm going to move down a little bit and run a row of the K's Crochet, and you can see the crease in the fabric from this. But yeah, these are much nicer, bigger holes. I don't know if you can see, probably not, the difference in the hole size. They're more spaced out, and they're a little bit larger. So if I pull this fabric pretty good, it should be apparent. These ones over here are the K's Crochet, and these are the Fiskars. So one really isn't better than the other, but I do prefer the larger holes that are more spaced out if you're going to be working with worsted weight yarn. If you're going to be working with a smaller weight yarn, you might actually prefer them to be closer together and smaller, because then you won't have gaps around your yarn. So if you're going to be using thread or like a fingering weight yarn, I would definitely want to go with the Fiskars. So anything that I showed you in that Edge It book, which is the name of that tool with the sharp edge on the crochet hook, any of those patterns might be better with a Fiskars blade versus the K's Crochet, which would be much better for fleece and worsted weight yarn. All right, so I'm going to set these aside, and I'm going to get that little blanket out. This yarn, or this blanket, has already been cut down to size. And I've pinned it with pins. You can cut it into any shape, any size you want. This one I just cut a square, and I used a bowl to round over my corners. So I just grabbed something round. I actually think I used this lid to this Woodwick candle jar. And so all I did was set it in the corner, and then with a solid blade, you just go around the edge and cut nice and tight, and you get nice round corners. Yeah, so the K's Crochet does fit in the Fiskars handle. And you can see that's what I'm using. This is Fiskars here. Again, I have it on the opposite side. So Fiskars pretty much holds any 45 millimeter blade. So you can see on the packaging. And then pretty much any other rotary handle that's this size will hold a Fiskars blade as well. So if you have just a different brand, you can use the Fiskars blades, or you can use the K's Crochet. And it fits just fine in here. The K's Crochet blade I bought on Amazon, and when this stream is done, I will look it up and I will post it in the description of the video. So if anyone's interested in buying one, you'll have that linked for you. So on this blanket, oh, actually, looks like I may have already cut holes in this blanket. Or did one edge? I'm going to grab different fabric because there's actually holes in one side of this, but just on the very edge. So I wonder if I started cutting these and then trimmed it down. Not sure what I was doing here. One of the things I will mention though, if you're going to crochet a blanket with 2 layers, it's really important that you pin it really well, because if your holes get off, you're going to make a total mess of everything as you're working. Because if you pick up a hole from here and a hole from further down the fabric, you're going to end up with wrinkles and all sorts of things happening that you don't want to happen. So I highly recommend that you pin it with safety pins that won't come out, or take locking stitch markers and put it through in a couple of places. So either of those will work. It's picture. So I'm going to just grab different fabric. We'll cut up this unicorn fabric that I was talking about before. All right, so I'm just going to cut off enough of this. Well, I'm going to cut this in half actually. So I have a little case that my mom made me with my rotary cutters, and I keep one with a solid blade on it and one with a skip cutter blade. That's really not necessary. You can absolutely switch back and forth, but these solid blades are really sharp, so I don't like handling them if I can help it. The skip cutter blades are not nearly as sharp as the solid blades, and that's not to say that they're safe to just handle however, but they're still better than the solid ones. So let's see if I can, I'm gonna fold this in half and find my halfway point. It's right there. All right. All right, so this is just a little bit too big for my mat. I'm gonna grab, I have a second mat that I can stick alongside here. Okay. And I'm just gonna trim along the edge here so that I can get down to my mat. This is not gonna be particularly straight, but it'll work. And it looks like my solid blade has a nick in it because it is not cutting through in every place. Alright, well that didn't go great, but we'll move on. Alright, so I'm going to move this in a little bit. And I'm going to line it up on my top edge here and trim off. We're going to trim this down just so that it fits on my board. I'm not really going with any particular size here, just a size that makes it fit. Better. All right. All right, so I'm just going to trim this up. Oops, that's the wrong blade. I'm just going to go along the edge here and get it as nice and straight as I can. And again, I love this plexiglass thing as a guide. They're usually found in the quilting tools. So if you're looking for these, this one's made by a company called Omni Grip. And it's got nice bright neon colors that make it nice and easy to see. Again, I'm going to line this edge up. You always want to cut these selvages off, and I'm going to trim a little bit extra off of this because I want this to fit all on my mat so that I can show you how I cut it. If I was doing this for an actual gift, I would not be worried that it fits on my mat. You can make any size work. You just keep moving your mat around with you. But for purposes of the stream, I want it to fit. Okay. For this, I'm just going to use some worsted weight acrylic yarn that I've got on hand. I'll probably use something pink. So that's nice and lined up. That's a little off, and that's a little off. So we're going to trim these guys up a little bit. Keep grabbing the wrong one. All right, that's pretty good. And again, you could round over your corners if you'd like. Again, I just take something round and line it up. See if I can show you a little bit better here. Just take something round and line it up so the edges of the round thing touch each side. And then you go around the edge and you cut the corner off. And you can make bigger rounded edges by using bigger circles. So you could grab a bowl or something larger and it would make a much larger rounded over edge. So you just go to each corner, you line your round thing up in the corner. It touches here and it touches there. And you just grab your rotary cutter and cut along the edge. And so that one's rounded. If you don't want to round your edges over, I still would recommend that you nip your corners because the corners will poke out of your crochet work. So you could just take a pair of scissors and cut your corners. And you can actually do that after you're done crocheting your edge on, but I prefer to do it beforehand. And there's my last corner. All right, so there's my little corners cut off. And so it looks, that's the wrong side of the fabric. So it looks like that. And I think that just looks a little bit nicer when you've got your rounded over edges. Looks like you, just gives it a nicer finish to it. And this is not perfectly rectangular right now. I'm kind of doing this quickly so that this doesn't go on too long, but this obviously is coming down further here. So the next thing you want to do is decide how far in you want your edge to be. So you can't have it too close, but if you go too far from the edge, it's either going to bunch with your stitches, or you're going to need to roll it over. So I've seen most people recommend a full inch, but if you do a full inch, you're going to have to fold your fabric over each time you make a stitch for it to have a nice like rolled edge underneath. I really prefer about a ½ inch. So most of the tutorials I've seen say an inch, but I would go less than that. So I'm going to line this up on my ½ inch mark. I've got this edge along a line. And so my mat has ½ inch marks. And then I'm just going to pick up my edging. What I like to do is start with one of my points down. So I just twist this so one of my points is down. And then I'll bring this so it's on camera here. I take this, and with my point down, I place it where I want it to be on my edge. So I place it down, and then I put a good amount of pressure, and you have to maintain a bit of pressure all the way down, and then stop before you get to the very end. And you can see, if you go off the edge, you risk cutting the edge and giving it a spot to fray from. It's really not that big of a deal if that happens, because you're going to crochet and it's going to sort of hold it together. So then you can either rotate it, or you can rotate yourself and work down another edge. And you can just pick up from where you left off. Again, line your fabric up on your cutting mat. If you have a cutting mat with a grid. If not, do your best with a ruler and, you know, some sort of backing, a cutting board from the kitchen or something like that will work, just to protect your countertops. And again, all right, so when I get to the end here, I'm going to have to pull this off so that I can pull this down. And if you're doing this with a much larger project and you don't have unlimited space, what I recommend doing is finding your last stitch. So mine's right here. I found my last hole. I'm going to line this back up, and then I'm going to take my blade, find my last hole again, find my last hole, and then I'm going to put the blade so that there's one cutting piece in that last hole. And even if it's not the last hole, it's not the end of the world, because the spaces should be even around the circle. And so you should cut the same holes the same distance apart. But this way I don't end up with two holes really close or really far apart, because I put that blade in one of those holes. And again, just going to rotate, line it up on a grid line, and pull this back a little bit. Put both ends on ½ inch. And cut to the edge, but not going off the edge. And last side. If you can't see your other edge, what you should do is try and line it up on two faces. So because I'm using this guide, I've got my blanket edge lined up on a line, and then I've got this edge lined up on a line. And so hopefully it's pretty close to square. I know it's not perfect because I didn't cut it perfect. But then what I can do is line this bottom edge up straight and this edge up straight. And so this thing, because it's a rigid piece of plastic, has to be straight then. Or at least hopefully is as close to straight as I could get it, so that when I run my line, I know that I'm cutting it in about as straight a line as I could possibly get. If you're working on, you know, a large blanket, you know, I have some that are 2 yards. This is necessary because you're not going to be able to get any one side of the blanket on your cutting mat at the same time. So again, I'm going to line up from this edge, and I'm going to line up the blanket itself on a line. That part's on a line. That part's on a line. This line is lined up, and it's on my 1/2 inch mark. And then the last thing I need to do is find my last hole and stick the blade in it. And done. All right. So it would be at this point, if I was doing a double layer blanket, that I would put all my pins in. I might have even put them in beforehand so it didn't move while I was working. So I'm going to sit back down and grab some yarn and see what we can do here. All right. So at this point, it's really your choice. You can use whatever you want. If you've got some colorful rainbow yarn that one of your grandkids or nieces or nephews or own kids picked out, you can use that along with this pattern. If you just want to use a solid yarn, that's fine. I'm just going to grab, this is just some pink. I'm pretty sure this is Karen 1 pound yarn, which is pretty cheap, and I have a ton of it. So I'm just going to use that. It's just a light pink. It'll be a cute edge on this pink and purple and teal blanket. So now all you have to do is make a slip knot. Sure, I can show making the slip knot one more time. So make a slip knot. It's pretty hard to see against the white background with the light pink yarn, but then you just go to your edge, and with a reasonably small hook, like I said, I'm using an F hook here. I think with the K's Crochet, you can go up to an H hook and still fit. Yeah, I can get an H hook in there, but it's starting to pull the fabric a little bit. 4.5 millimeter hook probably would fit just fine. Yeah, a 4.5 millimeter fits fine without stretching the fabric out too much. So I'll probably use that to go with this yarn. So I've put my hook in to the hole. Now I'm going to put my yarn on and tighten it up. And I'm going to draw it through the hole. I'm going to yarn over and I'm going to draw through. And that just puts my yarn on there. I try not to start crocheting from the corner. I like to go in a little bit, and that gives you the ability to finish a pattern around a corner and join to a side. And this is the front side of my fabric, so the back side's a little bit fuzzy, and so I want to be crocheting from right to left on the front side of my fabric. So I'm going to be working this direction down my fabric the way you would work if you were putting an edging on a blanket. So this will be the front side of my pattern. All right, so I'm holding with the fabric facing me. I'm going to put my crochet hook into the next hole. And this is a little bit tricky and it takes some time getting used to, but the thing that I found to be the easiest is just to put your hook against the fabric and let it find the hole. If you spend all of your time pulling it, one, you're going to stretch your fabric out and risk pulling it too hard and getting it to shred. It shouldn't shred easily, but you certainly could rip it because you've basically perforated this fabric all the way down. So I just put my hook against my fabric and move it and let it find the hole. And so it'll pop right through. I'm going to yarn over and grab that, yarn over, and complete that single crochet. And actually, that one really wasn't tightened on my hook back here, so I'm going to go back and fix that stitch. All right, and so you just work your way down the fabric and put a single crochet border on here. And kind of the nice thing here is that you have no chain row. So you can just work single crochets directly into this fabric. You have no chaining to do. If you find that it's bunching a little bit too much for your taste, loosen up your tension and make your loops a little bit bigger. So when you go through, pull a bigger loop up and don't cinch down on it so much. So I'm just kind of pulling sort of relaxed loops up. And I'll show you the difference after I make a few. Yep. So if I work with sort of some relaxed loops, I can kind of stretch this out a little bit. And you can see these stay a little bit more bunched and these are a little bit more relaxed. So it's going to bunch up just a little bit on you, and that's just because you're putting an edge on it. That'll work itself out when you do the next row, especially if you put multiple stitches into the single crochets, like a fan stitch. It will sort of relax out a little bit. It'll also help once you wash it and kind of pull it. You don't really block these because there's not really enough yarn to block, but just throwing it in the wash will sort of stretch it back out. So I'm just going to keep working down this row, and you can sort of see that this goes quickly. Again, trying to work with a looser tension than you normally would. These are much bigger loops than I would pull up normally. Probably can see it there, that this is a pretty big loop and it's not snug in my hook at all. You could obviously go up in hook size, but then you have to stab a larger hook through these holes, and that gets more difficult. So I would recommend just trying to work loosely with a smaller hook rather than going up to a larger hook. So you just work down the row, and once you work all the way around the blanket, you will just join to this stitch here, and then start your next row. So you could just put really whatever you want. You could just do a whole row of double crochets. Like I said, on some of those blankets that I showed you, each one has a different edging. So on this blanket here, I did a single crochet all the way around, and then in the next row I put a double crochet, chain one, skip one, and then double crochet. And then the next row around I work double crochets into the chains and chains over the double crochets. And so it's got kind of like a open look to it, but is not super open. You have to keep in mind when you're working some of these edges who you're going to be giving this to. I gave this to like a 3 or 4 year old, and so I wasn't worried about them, strangling themselves with it because these holes are, too big or whatever. But if you work something with big open holes, you don't want to give that to a newborn who's going to get their arms stuck in it or something like that. Some of these other blankets that I have here. This one, of course, again, I just put a single crochet border on the edge of it. And it looks, I think, just as nice as a blanket that you would buy at Walmart that's just been serged. So you could just put, if you had a serger on hand and you had thick enough thread, you could make the same blanket. But this is a pretty good approximation of just a serged edge. And like I said at the beginning of the video, this would be perfect for a super simple character blanket. You just pick up a piece of fabric with a child's favorite character and put a single crochet border around and call it done. On this polka dot one, I put a single crochet border, and then on the next row I put 3 double crochets in one stitch, 1 double crochet in the next stitch. So I just did a pattern of 3 and 1, 3 and 1 all the way around. And that gave it an edge that was not too wavy. Not too wavy, but has a little bit of wave to it. So it's not like a big ruffle on there. But it has just a nice, solid, simple look. And I think this would work for either a boy's blanket or a girl's blanket. I think easily I could give this as a Mickey Mouse blanket or, a Minnie Mouse blanket. And really, for a baby shower gift, this took a couple of hours, and you could get a stuffed animal, and you could just call it done. And it would be a beautiful baby shower gift. People would be very impressed with the pretty handmade edge. And really, it took almost no effort. This is 2 rows. 1 row of single crochet, 1 row of this more solid border, and you're done. So if you have any questions, go ahead and put those in the comment section. It looks like there might be a couple over here. And my tablet went to sleep on me, so give me a second. Yeah, so the couple of you that said you're going to try this out, I strongly recommend looking in the remnant section. Both Walmart and Joann Fabric usually have good remnant sections, especially right after Christmas, because they've had fleece on sale for literally like 3 months. It's been 70% off. So if you go over to the remnant section, it's usually chock full of fleece. So you can get some decent size fleece remnants. And if you pick ones with patterns that are multi-directional, so like I was explaining, this is a bad choice because the pattern only goes one direction. It'll work fine for a car seat blanket and just a little blanket to throw around like a umbrella stroller or something like that. This will be a perfect size. But if you want to make a blanket, you can really make a toddler size blanket out of 1 yard of fabric, because you can use it long ways. So fabric with edge to edge, so they call it width of fabric, is usually 54 inches or thereabouts by 36 inches. And that's perfect for a toddler bed or even like a throw, just for, throwing on the couch or something. You can make a pretty good size blanket out of 1 yard of fabric, which is usually the minimum for throwing into the remnant bin at Joann Fabric. Occasionally, you'll find pieces that are just a little bit over a yard, and so I try to aim for those. I don't ever buy anything less than a yard if I'm planning on making a blanket with it, because it's just not big enough. Oop. Yeah, $26 a meter for fabric is pretty pricey. Most of the pieces here are about $10 a yard for list on the tag, and then most of the winter they've had those for 60% off. So a yard of fabric, you'd be looking at about $6 for $6 US for fabric. So that's kind of a bummer if fabric is that expensive. But hopefully, if you find a place that does remnants, that they'll give you a bit of a discount. But even so, Um, for a yard, this still makes a pretty good blanket. And honestly, you're really not going to use that much yarn. So you sort of have to weigh the cost of a whole blanket versus one with a fabric center and then a yarn edge. So it's kind of a sort of a math equation of how much time it's going to take you, how much it would cost you to use decent yarn to make a blanket versus buying fabric and then putting just a thin yarn edge around that. So, yeah, I'm not sure where to recommend cheaper fabric in Canada, but maybe somebody online can recommend somewhere that might have a little bit better prices for that. And yeah, a lot of the Walmarts in the U.S. have stopped selling fabric too. I have one near me that has a really good fabric section, and the other two have pretty terrible fabric counters. The bigger issue around me is getting somebody to come cut the fabric. They have 2 aisles of fabric, but nobody will ever come cut it. And when they do, they a lot of times send like somebody from automotive who doesn't know what they're doing, and you might as well just cut it yourself, if they'd let you. So yeah, there's the start to my blanket there. Just put a nice edge on the edge here. Yeah, Hobby Lobby is another option for the U.S. I don't think they have Canadian stores. For the other, for those of you in Canada, it might be an option to purchase fabric as a lot on eBay. I know shipping to Canada can be kind of expensive, but if you've got enough fabric all in one lot, and fleece doesn't weigh that much, maybe it would be worth it to get cheap fleece from the US shipped to Canada. So it might be an option. I don't know if you can get fleece on Amazon or not. Might be worth looking into. At least in the US, Michaels has started selling fabric online. So I know Michaels is available in Canada. So that might also be an option. I don't know if Canadian Michaels has fabric online yet or not, or if they'll be getting that. I know that they have quite different websites. I've looked at Canadian Michaels' website, and it's pretty bare bones compared to the US version. So yeah. But yeah, so you can just work around this edge and just work all the way around. One of the things I would recommend so I've got a hole here and a hole here, and so those are obviously too far apart on my corners. So I probably do need to go back around my corners and put a couple of holes. You can use just a little pair of scissors and try and eyeball them, or you can just get the cutter back out and just edge around the corner there. Some of the edging patterns are going to call for a specific number of stitches. So what I would recommend is crocheting all the way around in a single crochet border. And then say it calls for there to be 50 stitches on an edge. There's no way you're ever going to measure out the exact right amount of holes. What you'd be better off doing is skipping stitches. So if it says that it has to be a multiple of 3 and you have 70, just skip one. And then you have 69 stitches and it works out. You're much better off just adjusting your edge and skipping over a single stitch. Nobody will notice. That's much easier than trying to count the holes that you're punching as you're going around your fabric. trying to hit a multiple of 3. That would be really insanely impossible to do. If you're going to cut your holes by hand, which is an option, you could just put a piece of tape on your fabric, like some painter's tape, to mark how far away from the edge you are, and then just go along and cut with a little pair of scissors, or some people have recommended an ice pick. I don't own an ice pick. I don't even know where you'd get one, but you would just go along and stab holes along the edge, which would work just fine. It would just be a lot more labor intensive than running a skip cutter along the edge. So those are all options just to get holes, but again, I strongly recommend the skip cutter, and really I recommend the Kay's Crochet one from Amazon over the other ones, though it does seem like the Fiskars one will work. Just that one at Joann Fabric, and I don't remember the brand, but it's the one that they carry in store, really didn't work at all for my friend. And again, it could just be that she had bad luck, and maybe she just didn't know what she was doing, but she didn't seem to have any trouble with the Kay's Crochet one. So take that with a grain of salt, I guess. You could always give it a try, and if it's terrible, return it. All right, well, I think I'm going to wrap up, and if you have any questions, like always, please feel free to find me on Facebook, on Instagram. YouTube has a new messaging system where you can message in general, but you can also just leave questions in the comment section, and I'll answer those. I'm usually pretty good about getting those answered in a couple of days. So please, if you have any questions, find me on any of those platforms, ask questions. I'm more than happy to help out if you're running into any problems. Just let me know. As always, if you're not subscribed, go ahead and hit subscribe, and make sure you hit the little bell so you get notifications when I'm, doing things like a live stream. Someone was asking if I put 3 single crochets in the corner. It depends on how many holes that you have. If you have your holes nice and evenly spaced around the edge, you don't need 3 in the corner because there's no break. So normally if you're working the corner of a crochet project, you would put 3 in the corner because you have to make the turn. But if there's holes all the way around the edge, they're there to make the turn. You might want to put a couple extras in here in the corners, just to make it a little bit easier for yourself. But I don't think it's entirely necessary to put 3 in the corner. It might become more necessary when you get to the next row. So once you get all your single crochets in, on the next row, you're going to have a corner stitch. That might be where you want to put more stitches so that it turns the corner nicely. Really, I know it's not a great thing to say, but you sort of have to mess with it and just see what works for your pattern. Or, whatever stitch you're going to be working with. If it's folding after you've made the turn, you don't have enough stitches, and pull it back out and put some more stitches in there so that it lays flat. That's really the best advice I can offer you on that. All right. With that being said, if there are no other questions, I will hang out in the live chat for a little while, but it will shut off after a little bit, after we end the live stream. But if there's no other questions right now, Happy New Year, and thank you for watching.